Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Music for a Book podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Britt.
And I'm Hannah.
And every 2 weeks, we read and review a book, assign a song to that book, draw the parallels between the two, and have some fun along the way. So welcome back to Season 2, Episode 11 of the Music for a Book podcast.
And this week, we've chosen a book. It's been circulating Book Talk for years. I read it a few years ago, and I was really excited to reread it with Britt this time.
Yes.
We read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid.
I was so happy to finally dive into this book because it's been on my TBR. It's been high on my TBR. I just never really prioritized it over some of the other books and stuff that we've read. So I was really happy to take my first stab at Taylor Jenkins Reid. All right. So how this episode is going to work is we are going to go over trigger warnings and a brief synopsis of the book, and then we will reveal our song choices, which is our favorite part of this podcast. And then after our song choices, we will move into what we like to call spoiler territory, meaning that we will be covering anything and everything that happens cover to cover inside this book. And I will say this one is pretty chronological, so we probably won't do too many things out of order, but we very much might make connections from the beginning that we didn't, hear about until the end and things like that. So if you haven't read the book and you want to read the book, that would be your time to back out and come back after you have. Dear Reader. So some trigger warnings for The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo: domestic abuse, homophobia, death, suicide, alcoholism, biphobia, abortion, miscarriage. In general, this is fairly heavy on LGBTQ topics back in the day, so there are some heavier things that kind of go along with that. So be sure that you check your triggers because you know what things that you need to avoid before you dive on in.
Yes. So our lovely synopsis from Storygraph: aging and reclusive Hollywood movie icon Evelyn Hugo is finally ready to tell the truth about her glamorous and scandalous life. But when she chooses unknown magazine reporter Monique Grant for the job, no one is more astounded than Monique herself. Why her? Why now? Monique is not exactly on top of the world. Her husband has left her, and her professional life is going nowhere. Regardless of why Evelyn has selected her to write her biography, Monique is determined to use this opportunity to jumpstart her career. Summoned to Evelyn's luxurious apartment, Monique listens in fascination as the actress tells her story. From making her way to Los Angeles in the 1950s, to her decision to leave show business in the 80s, and of course, the 7 husbands along the way. Evelyn unspools a tale of ruthless ambition, unexpected friendship, and a great forbidden love. Monique begins to feel a very real connection to legendary star. But as Evelyn's story nears its conclusion, it becomes clear that her life intersects with Monique's own in a tragic and irreversible way.
So dramatic. I actually did not read. That's the thing. If y'all have been around, I just don't read the synopsis. Really. If I need to know what a book is about to see if I'm vibing with it, for sure. But if it's a heavily recommended book, I'm just going to go in blind and hope for the best. So, all right. Are we ready to reveal our song choices for 7 Husbands?
Yes.
Oh, it's for the first time ever, you guys. I had too many songs to pick from. I really did. But about, halfway through the book, this song hit me and I listened to a few dozen others. I narrowed it down to 5. And this song I just kept coming back to because there's an interesting theory behind the song. So I'm excited to talk about that later. And I'm actually picking a song that Hannah picked earlier this season. So my song is Ivy by Taylor Swift.
Okay. I also went with our girl Taylor, but I picked Maroon.
I almost chose the lucky one.
Me too. It felt too on the nose.
Yes. It felt like I listened to it and I'm like, oh, this is the soundtrack to 7 Husbands, but this isn't the song. This isn't what I want to discuss about 7 Husbands.
Yep.
So
no, I agree with you. The Lucky Ones is very Evelyn coded for sure.
Yes. So I'm excited to talk about our songs, and Hannah picked Ivy for a very different book. So it'll be interesting to see, how things are a little bit different.
Yes. All right. Now we are diving into Evelyn's life. So if you are ready to hear about her 7 husbands and the greatest love of her life, then continue on. If you want to read it on your own, pause and come back, and then you can gossip with us about Evelyn with Monique.
Do highly recommend listening and or reading this one if you haven't. So
all right. I know the synopsis kind of introduced our 2 main characters, but I think it's important that we kind of know who's narrating this story.
Totally.
So Monique is our author, basically. So she's a writer for Vivant, and she's like chosen to write this exclusive piece about Evelyn Hugo, because apparently Evelyn Hugo is like donating all these dresses, like auctioning these dresses for charity.
Yeah.
So it's like a very popular piece. Like Evelyn is, has been out of the limelight for a while and everything.
Mhm.
And we're like confused as to why Monique got chosen. Like the synopsis said, she's recently divorced. Her husband, David, said, see ya, and moved to the other side of the country. You want to talk about our starlet?
Yeah. So then we have Evelyn Hugo herself, and she is a movie star. She is one of those movie stars. I feel like I would parallel her to someone like our version of Marilyn Monroe is kind of what I imagined, but she ascertained more success in terms of like Oscar nominations and things like that. Like Hannah said, she is retired and she's selling her dresses to raise money for charity. Evelyn has a story to tell, and we'll find out exactly how she's going to tell that story here in just a minute.
Yes. And I feel like early life Marilyn, I know I read somewhere too that like Elizabeth Taylor was an inspiration.
Yeah.
And that very like classy, both of them.
Yeah, her reputation gave me like the way that the way that people viewed her gave me Marilyn vibes.
Mm-hmm.
After Monique is reluctantly sent by her employer to this, they basically are like, well, we have about a dozen other people that we would rather do this than you, but she said it's you or bust. So I guess it's you because we're not missing out on this story. And so Monique goes to meet Evelyn for the first time under the pretense that she's writing a cover story for Vivant about this dress auction that she's doing. Evelyn then tells her, no, that is not why she's there. She is there to get the entire story, the entire scoop on Evelyn's life, her loves, her husbands, all of her lies, deceit, all of her mistakes, her rights, her wrongs, everything in between. And Monique is going to do this in the form of a book. She's like, oh, so I'll ghostwrite for you. No, it is Monique's book, Monique's name, with Evelyn's story. She needs to sell it to the highest possible bidder. She needs to make the most amount of money. However, she can only do that after Evelyn passes away.
Yep.
Monique is confused. I was confused because I'm like, there has to be a tie between Monique and Evelyn for this to make any sense, because Monique she basically was plucked out of obscurity to go do this. And Evelyn tells her, oh, I saw your work. I was inspired by it. But like, I just didn't buy it.
Yeah. And Monique does text her mom because Monique's dad passed away a long time ago when she was really young. And so she texts her mom like, hey, because her dad worked on movie sets.
Yep.
Like, hey, was dad friends with any like celebrities or movie stars? And her mom's like, no, I wish he was. I always wanted celebrity friends.
Yeah.
So like Monique was trying to find that connection too. Like, was there something there that maybe they didn't know about?
Yeah, Monique decides, even though it's not what her job is asking for and it could jeopardize her employment with Vivant, that she's going to move forward with it anyway because she would be stupid to pass up on this opportunity. We start learning about Evelyn's early life, and there is one big question that's on the table that Monique asks, and we don't get it answered for quite some time. Who is the love of Evelyn Hugo's life if she's had 7 husbands in a whirlwind of a lifetime?
I'd be curious too.
I would too.
Like, you have these husbands, and some of them were like very like big stars in different ways, and she had a kid with one of them. Like,
yeah,
so who was that love?
Exactly.
But one of the things too is like her editors at Vivant do not know that she's writing the book. Like, so her like boss calls her and like checks in and like sees how their first meeting went. Oh, will she sit for a cover? And Monique's like, no. Like, she's still kind of like trying to figure out what to do with this information too.
Yeah, it's interesting. So how it's kind of split up too. The book is structured almost interview style. So we have Monique's perspective, and then we have perspectives of Evelyn talking about her life and everything that happened. And then we also have newspaper clippings and articles kind of scattered through. And it reads very much like a chronological storyline of someone's life and less like a book to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it felt very much like, okay, I'm reading what Monique gathered about Evelyn's life.
Yep.
And I'm not reading the book written about Monique writing a book about Evelyn's life.
No, I agree with you there. So let's start out with Evelyn's early life.
Perfect.
How she, like Evelyn describes herself and says, I was gorgeous even at 14. And she already knew that the whole world prefers a woman who didn't know her power. She turned heads and was like, I didn't give myself this body, but I'm not here going to say and be like, oh, people thought I was pretty. She knew from a young age that she could use her looks and use what was given to her to kind of get ahead. So her mom died when she was young. Her dad was abusive. So she knew she had to get the F out of Hell's Kitchen. And so they kind of start talking a little bit about that. But then Monique is really on that big question of who was the love of Evelyn's life. Monique starts to press her about it. And that's when Evelyn's like, you know what? It's getting late. We'll continue this on Monday. And Monique, I feel has that moment. She's like, crap, did I mess up? And she's like, no, you know what? I'm going to stick to what I was doing. So as she's leaving, right? She's thinking about all these things in the back of her mind. One, how did her marriage fail? But really, she wants to know who the hell was Evelyn Hugo in love with? Because nobody knows.
No.
Except Evelyn.
No one knows. And I think something that's very interesting about Evelyn, she is a no-nonsense, very much owns who she is, who she was, the things that she did. She speaks very eloquently about regret and how you can feel sorry for the things that you've done and feel remorseful for the things that happened in the way that they did, but you don't have to feel regret for things because they shape, who you are and how you're moving forward. She says, because I know I had my reasons and I did the best I could with every thought and feeling that led up to it. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that whole quote shapes Evelyn's story moving forward and how we should view the things that she did and the things that happened to her.
No, I like that. So Monique goes back. Her and Evelyn start the story. So Monique says, let's go chronologically. Tell me more about Ernie Diaz, your first husband. And Evelyn's like, all right, it's as good a place to start as any. So we get to meet poor Ernie Diaz. So husband number one, Ernie Diaz. Poor Ernie. Evelyn totally used him.
Oh,
totally used him.
Without a doubt. And I think this was the husband that she lied about her age to, right?
Yep. Yeah, because she was, she 16 or something like that.
Her dad signed off on her marriage and Ernie did not know about it. She thinks that Ernie knew.
Yeah, but she was that beautiful, right? As apparently
exactly.
So Ernie did work on the movies, on the movie set. And so that's where Evelyn's like, oh, that's my ticket. Cool, let's go. So they moved out to Los Angeles and she started going to this diner to be discovered, right? She tried to be the perfect housewife at home for Ernie, but she had her motivations too.
Exactly.
And so at this diner, I just think it's funny that the guy, probably the manager, is like, I know what you're trying to do, lady. And throws a checkbook or whatever at her and is like, go wait tables, make yourself useful. And she's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
No.
She's this young girl, never really had a job, and says she messes up these orders and everything. But finally she meets Mr. Harry Cameron. I just want Harry to be my best friend.
Same.
I mean, we'll learn more about him later, but I just love Harry.
Yeah, he's such a probably one of the only stable pieces in her entire life. And just, I love the relationship.
And so she meets Harry at the diner and he puts her in her first role because Harry is a producer at Sunset Pictures.
Yep. And Evelyn is so precocious and so over the top that basically straight out of the gate, she's like, I demand to be put in lead roles because I am the lead. I mean, you got to give it to her because she really had some balls doing that.
Yep. And Harry's like, Ari, who's the head of the studio or whatever.
Yeah.
Is never going to approve you for that part. Never going to approve you for lead roles. And she's like, why not? Why can't I be that person?
Yeah.
Her name originally was Evelyn Diaz. And so there was a lot of well, you can't be the daughter of this white man because your name is Evelyn Diaz. And she's like, yeah, I can be. Like, she was just
Yeah.
so confident. Like, and Harry's like, well, it needs to be a nice blonde girl. And she's like, I can be a nice blonde girl. Like, dye my hair. Let's go. And I just love, like, Evelyn just, like, goes for it.
Yeah.
So Evelyn, using, you know, her body and what she just knew how to, like, manipulate men.
100%.
You know, it wasn't like they didn't use her. Like, she definitely used them. Like,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
sure. So she does seduce Ari, who's like head of the studio. He ends up putting her into bigger roles.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing that happened in this like section that I died on how Evelyn was like so overconfident was that there was a role that she really, really wanted that was given to someone else who was way, you know, more qualified than her. The movie bombed at the box office, and she literally wrote a note, sent it in the studio mail, and was like, I would have knocked it out of the park. Like, imagine being that confident in yourself and your abilities. Like, what a life to live.
Right. Since now she kind of got what she wanted, studio suggests that she divorces Ernie.
Yep.
Change her last name.
Hmm.
She does go home and tell Ernie that she's leaving, and he like cries for 6 hours straight. And I'm like, oh, poor Ernie.
I know.
And then like the studio gives him a payout. So hopefully, you know, Ernie went on to live his life better, onto bigger and better things, and somebody that was actually age appropriate for him.
Yep.
And so, you know, now she was 18, got herself out of the marriage, like she was ready to become the star that she knew she could be.
Absolutely. Then we move on to husband number 2. Goddamn Don Adler.
I do love early Don. Like,
I do too.
You know, because I just like picture him being like a young Clint Eastwood, like Scott Eastwood.
Yes.
Like, you know, like just that very like James Dean, you know, just
like a young Clooney, like that kind of vibe. Yeah. Yes. And I just imagine them being like so unbelievably gorgeous together that people like can't imagine. Like they walk by and you're like, you cannot fathom how good they look, sort of thing.
Like Brad and Jen back in the day.
Yes.
Like I feel like when they were that it couple for us when we were younger, like
absolutely.
I mean, Travis and Taylor now, I guess.
Literally,
you know?
I was like, it's the Travis and Taylor.
But literally, like, what a fun Hollywood romance, you know?
Yeah. And so with Don, basically, we're moving forward and they tell her, okay, listen, we're going to have you be seen out and about with some stars. And she rejects this one guy. She thinks he's kind of gross. And they're like, Evelyn, you just have to play the game. Like, you have to, like, gussy up to these guys. We need your name up on these tabloids. And they're kind of dangling a role in her dream movie. It's a recreation of Little Women. And they keep dangling it in front of her. And they're like, oh, you will get that role. Don't worry. You'll get that role. Don't worry. But she kind of turned into just, like, Hollywood's blonde, like, young blonde bombshell. And so instead, she was, you know, fit into this mold that they were like, you will be famous if you do this, more or less. So she ends up being told, like, hey, there's a hot up-and-coming actor. He's going to be at the top of his game. He's going to be really good for you to be seen out with him. His name is Don Adler. He's a Nepo baby. He's, you know, living his life. He's a movie star. Everything's great. And the difference here between this one and Ernie is that they actually like hit it off. They really have this like whirlwind kind of romance, and she is swept off her feet by him. And also something that I thought was super interesting about this book was how freely her like sexuality, not just like in terms of everything that happens later, but just how freely she spoke of her sexuality, the things that she got using her sexuality from people in Hollywood, and also how she felt about truly felt about the people that she loved through her lifetime.
Yeah.
And Don was someone that she was very much attracted to. Like, that was the first time that she felt like, okay, I'm here for this man.
I just love how she describes it. Like, I found myself brightening up at the moment I set eyes on him, always finding reasons to touch him, reasons to bring him up in conversation when he wasn't around. And Harry was sick of hearing about him. Like, so that's very much like just that young love.
Yeah. Yep. You know, they tell her, listen, we know you want to do Little Women, but hear me out instead. You're going to go through this kind of structure. You're going to do these cute rom-coms. You had one, it was so good. You're going to do another with Don. It's going to blow up. And people are going to be like, okay, this wasn't a one shot. This wasn't a one-time thing. You're going to blow up now because you've done the same thing. You've recreated the magic and you're good to go. And then once people have kind of placed you into this box and they know that you're good at what you do. Then you're going to do Little Women and prove to them that you are a serious actress, that you can accomplish this job. You're more than a one-trick pony sort of thing. And so her and Don do a movie. Her and Don get married. Everything was great for about 2 weeks after they got married, which is unfortunate, but Don does become abusive pretty quickly in their marriage.
Yes. So during this time too, Harry confides in Evelyn and they like decide that they are going to be best friends.
Yes.
Like
yes.
they are going to be best friends.
Love that.
Evelyn finds out that she is not Harry's type.
No.
And she always kind of suspected it because Harry was one of the few that didn't stare at her chest or kind of like objectify her and her looks that way. And so Harry's just like, it's a long, complicated story, but you've just never been my type.
Yep.
And that's when they're like, you know what? We're best friends. Like, you're my best friend, Harry. And Harry's like, you're mine, Evelyn. And so they're just little best friends. And yes, Don, not the Hollywood icon that we know and love.
No. Yeah, Don is he's kind of a piece of shit. He essentially wanted her to not work anymore, correct? He wanted her to have a family. Yeah.
Because his career was starting to get rocky. So
yes.
I feel like he was also very jealous of her.
Yes.
And is if I'm not doing well, you're not doing well.
He could not handle her success.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I think you've gotten the wrong impression here, Evelyn. And she's like, and how is that? And he says, we are not equals, love. And I'm sorry if I've been so kind that you've forgotten that. I think this should be the last movie you do. It just fell I feel like Evelyn really started to just shield herself after this. She just started to look at things. She was already looking at some things transactionally, but I think from here on out, she looked at almost everything transactionally, minus a few very, very close-knit relationships that she had. And he does hit her, which is not great.
And so Evelyn does get the role in Little Women.
Yes.
So she is starring opposite Ruby Riley, Joy Nathan, and Celia St. James. So this is where we meet Celia.
Yes.
And I just when Harry tells her who she's going to be starring opposite, he's like, what, you don't like Celia St. James because she makes a face?
Yeah.
And Evelyn just is like, that teenage bitch is going to act me under the table. She's going to be so threatened,
Yep.
But then they do become friends.
Yes, they do.
Co-star friends. So Celia and Evelyn end up hitting it off. They become friends. Go out to dinner, dancing, all of that stuff, and just kind of get to know each other. How she describes Celia too is just, she had a childlike girl next door kind of face. Big, round, pale blue eyes, long lashes, Cupid's bow lips, long strawberry red hair. She was simply perfected. And she says Celia was the sort of beautiful that felt as if you could hold it in your hands. If you played your cards right, you might just get to marry a girl like Celia St. James. And she says that the way Celia looked at her too made her feel if no one had really looked at her before, not even Don. So she starts to almost feel bad that she was threatened by Celia, because I think she sees that she's just normal, and she starts to take a liking to Celia.
Now they do go through this kind of rocky period where they can't really control what the tabloids are saying about her and Don, and they're saying that Don wants this life, this marriage, these children, and Evelyn will not give them to him. And Evelyn has this idea that she is going to fake a miscarriage to, just kind of get the limelight off of them. They basically are they're going to hate me and lose respect for you if they think that I can't give you a baby. So this is what we're going to do.
Yep.
There's an article written about them. Tragedy has befallen them for the third time. So it's an ongoing story now that they're trying to have children and they just simply cannot.
Celia asks Evelyn too, do you love him? About Don.
Yep.
Evelyn's it's hard to say if I do or don't love him, or if I'm with him for any reason. And I think just like, now Evelyn, after like he hit her, right? She's like, is this the right move? Like, what is going on? And her and Celia just become like really close. And Evelyn describes too, she said that like people think intimacy is about sex, but intimacy is actually about truth. And once you can tell someone your truth, when you show yourself to them, when you can stand in front of them and their response is, you're safe with me, like that's intimacy. And so she feels that with Celia one night when they're just kind of talking and opening up about life and everything. And that's when she also realizes like, this is how like you love someone. Like just that feeling. So her and Celia become like really close, like
Very
really
close.
confide in each other. And
they basically are seen all around town doing anything and everything together.
And so fast forward to the night of their premiere for Little Women. And Celia like doesn't want to go with like the date that she got set up with. Like it's like, Evelyn, can't we just go together? And Evelyn's like, no, you need to be seen like with this guy on the carpet.
Yep.
And so they go and have a great time. The movie is great. And then at the wrap party, we find out that Don is cheating on Evelyn.
And Evelyn also finds out something very interesting about Celia. And Ruby, one of the co-stars, was basically just like, listen, people have been saying all kinds of things about you and Celia. And she's like, I have no clue what you are speaking of. And Ruby's just like, she's a lesbian, Evelyn. And so she finds out this and that Don are cheating.
Like simultaneously.
Yes, exactly. And so what's interesting though is when Ruby said it, Evelyn says, I did not think, oh my God, my husband is cheating on me. I thought I have to find Celia.
Yeah. And so then we go back to like Monique, right? And she's like questioning Evelyn. She's like, did you know that Celia St. James was gay? And Evelyn's like, I'm telling you the story as it unfolded. Like,
yeah.
I feel like she was just kind of like, I'm telling you chronologically. Like,
yeah.
I'm telling you when I found out.
Okay, Monique reminded me of a person like that you're watching a movie with, but you're both watching it for the first time. And they keep asking you what's going to happen. And they're like, I know the exact same amount of information as you do. And like, even though I know Evelyn knows everything, she's like, I'm telling you this in order for a reason.
Yep. And so this is when like Monique's also realizing like, maybe the love of her life is not one of the 7 husbands. So she, asks Evelyn, it's okay to tell me, like, Evelyn, who was your great love? Like, who was it? And Evelyn just kind of like takes a deep breath and says, Celia St. James. And says, I feel like I spent my entire life loving her. And then Monique is like, so this book, your biography, you're ready to come out as a gay woman? And I can just like feel Evelyn just be like close her eyes and have to like compose her response to Monique.
Yeah. Her energy also gave me a little, just a hint of Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada. Like the way like that's how she carried herself, where she's just like, that's all. Like that's what I imagine, like soft spoken and very like regal almost.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Evelyn's like, have you not been listening? I love Celia, but before her, I also love Don.
Yeah.
So like matter of fact, like don't, like, why are you putting me in a box as a gay woman? Like, I have loved many people, and, saying like she's bisexual. And then Monique's like, oh yeah, like I'm biracial. And I just put her in a box. I'm like, Monique, come on, girl.
I know. It's one of the, now I can only think in Devil Wears Prada quotes, but she's like, did you fall on the pavement and smack your little head? Like, that's what I imagine. She's looking at her like, girl, be so for real right now.
Yep.
Evelyn didn't have to go after Celia. Celia actually found her. And she confronts her. She asks her, she's like, do you sleep with women? And Celia's like, is that going to make a difference in our friendship? Like, what's going on? And, in this time frame, it was not okay to be queer. It was not okay.
No.
And so I think Celia immediately put up her defenses because she's like, well, here we go. Like, I got to, shove this down, cover it up, do whatever I do. But instead, Evelyn stops her from going out. And Celia and Evelyn end up kissing for the first time.
Yep.
And
then I feel like it's just like
yeah,
a snowball effect after that.
absolutely.
So that happens, and they're like, all right, we gotta go. We gotta figure this out. Evelyn runs upstairs to find Don, finish putting on his pants and, with the lady that he was cheating on her with. And she ends up leaving with Harry and is like, Harry, I'm divorcing him. Like, we're done. Then we get to divorce number 1 or divorce number 2. Sorry.
Yes.
Divorce number 2.
And so, and Dawn basically leaves her before she can leave him, because when she leaves the party, she does not go home. She goes with Harry. And Dawn takes that as, oh, nope, she's done with me. I'm going to get ahead of the curve here. And so he's like, here, you can have the house, you can have my money, you can have whatever you want. But he ensures that the studio blackballs her and that she makes it almost impossible within the studio that she was currently working in to find any sort of role, because he refuses to work with her on set. So what does she do? She moves in with Celia.
Yep. And at first they're like, they sleep in the same bed, but they don't do anything. They just are very chaste. And then finally, they kind of open up to each other. And, Evelyn's kind of nervous, right? Because I think she's in love again, right? It's this new experience for her. And so side note too about Monique is Monique gets a call from her boss and is like, how's it going? We haven't gotten any information. And so Monique contemplates on telling them the truth or sticking to the lie.
Yep.
And Monique does kind of own up, but she does it in a way of hey, this is what Evelyn wants, and if you want a part of it, this is what you're giving me. Because what she's kind of learned from Evelyn, is to ask for it. Why not?
Yeah.
If they say no, okay, you didn't have it anyway, but to ask for it. So she asked to be editor at large, and her boss agrees for a writer at large with a raise and everything. So
yeah,
Monique's feeling good that she's able to do that.
She also convinces, and by convinces, she demands, because she strikes up the deal with Vivant that they're going to have a piece of the story at least. So she Uno reverses Evelyn and uses her own powers on her. And I think at that point is when Evelyn really realized, I picked the right person to tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was non-negotiable. You're going to sit for a photo shoot for the cover. And Evelyn's everything is negotiable. And haven't you gotten enough? And Monique's no, I'm learning from the best. You're going to have a cover. We're going to do a snippet of the story. And then I will still, release everything once you have passed away. And also something too, Monique is by the way, when are you going to die? And I was I don't know if that's appropriate to ask. So,
right?
And I know it's part of the stipulation and part of the, the contract of this book that she's writing. But I was Monique, I'm unclear if you continually asking Evelyn when she's going to die. I don't know how that's furthering your cause here.
So chapter 24 has one of my favorite scenes.
Yes.
So Celia's nominated for an award, but so she goes to the award show and Evelyn stays at home to watch the award show on TV. And so Celia accepts the award and thanks Evelyn because they are best friends, right? So to the outside world. So it's not weird. But Evelyn is so overcome with love that she kisses the TV and ends up cracking her tooth.
I love it so much.
I just think about that every award show now. It's I want somebody to say, what she says later.
Yes.
If anyone's thinking of kissing the TV tonight. And so Celia comes home too and is what happened to your tooth? And Evelyn's it's embarrassing. But I just think it's so adorable. I don't know.
Yes.
It's really cute.
I love it.
So rumors do start floating around though about Evelyn and Celia because Celia in the past, it's been kind of rumored around her anyway.
Yeah.
So then she goes to Paris to try to revive her career too.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets a call from Max and asks her have you done nudity before? I think you should be topless in film. And she's sure, go for it.
Yeah.
Evelyn's I'm down to do anything. My career is in the toilet. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so she does film this movie.
It's what is it? Boutantre, I think it's called. And she convinces them though that instead of, because she says that she's like, everyone wants to be teased. She said, so instead of giving them everything, when I'm coming out of this water, and this is something even too, like when Monique was researching Evelyn, she said that she watched the scene from Bouton's like multiple times because Evelyn is like coming out of the water and it's slow-mo all the way down. She is topless, but it cuts it off right before you see everything and it just is black, as if they like eliminated something from the film that was supposed to be there, but they did it intentionally, and people went feral for that shit.
Yeah. Like, this movie just was like an international sensation.
Yes.
Like, it was just blew her back up, kind of gave her what she wanted, right? That, like, back in the limelight.
Yep.
So, fun fact for all of you Taylor Jenkins Reid readers, right? Mick Riva pops up in, like, every book. And
it's so funny.
And so this was the first one I read, too, and, like, just this little bit, but Malibu Rising is really about Mick, and that's very interesting. But, like, you don't like him. Like, Mick Riva.
Yeah.
And so he just...
I love Easter eggs from authors. I love when they do that.
And, like, this is a fun one because it's, like, I don't know, he just randomly appears.
Yeah.
In different books. But so now we get husband number 3.
Yes.
And that is Sir Mick Riva.
Sure is. And Evelyn does it to try and, like, distract the tabloids of her and Celia. And Celia is hesitant about all of this, but she's like, cool, it's fine. Everything will be great. So they go to see Mick perform. She ends up married to him for like, I don't know, 12 hours, maybe something like that. Shotgun wedding. They get married. They sleep together. Mick is immediately like, this isn't what I wanted, because Evelyn went in with a plan. Evelyn went in 1,000% just to use Mick. And she had like, it felt like a 17-step plan to be like, well, here's how you're going to get him to hate you. And here's how you're going to get an annulment immediately. And it's basically like, oh yeah, you're just going to lay there stiff as a board. You're going to give him nothing. You're going to literally just, he's going to be so in love with the like idea of you and put you on such a high pedestal that when you disappoint him so severely, he's gonna come to Jesus and be like, oh no, I cannot be doing this.
Yep.
So shotgun wedding, quick annulment. And there was something that did come of this though, because they did sleep together. Evelyn does get pregnant and she has an abortion, but this causes some serious tension with Celia because she's like, I agreed to you marrying him. I didn't agree to you sleeping with him. And she's like, I married a man. What did you want from me?
Yeah. Evelyn's like, I thought it was implied. Like,
I got married.
We have transactional. What do you, yeah.
And we just learned.
I just feel so bad for Celia. Like,
so bad.
Yeah. The fucking Mick Riva of all people.
Literally. But another song that I like, the lyrics didn't fully fit, but like as I was listening to this and as I was reading through, I just kept hearing Harry Styles' Love of My Life. Just like,
oh yeah, that was one of my songs.
Baby, you were the love of my life. The lyrics just didn't quite fit the vibe that I was going for. But as I was listening and reading and looking at these articles, like that's just, I just kept hearing his voice in my head, like, baby, you were the love of my life. And I just, like, Celia's heart was just not meant for how cavalier Evelyn could be about things. No. It just really wasn't.
No, and like, I mean, we'll talk more about this as like the relationships go on, but it just, it broke my heart for Celia so many times. And
me too.
They break up. Yep. Celia and Evelyn, because Celia just can't take it, which I don't blame her one bit. Like, I don't either. Blame her. Like,
I think it's hard too because Celia was like, again, we're in a time where being part of the LGBTQ plus community is not accepted. If they were caught together, if there were things that like if they came out, it literally could have just changed the trajectory of their whole career. It could have tanked everything that they had worked toward. And so Celia was, I think, working toward the guts to be able to do that, and Evelyn was just, that was never an option for her. Like, no, that was not on the table, at least in this part of her life. That was just never going to be it, because this is something that Evelyn says later, but it wasn't that she was chasing like the craft of acting, it was that she was chasing proving herself and her self-worth in terms of her acting, her self-worth in terms of her awards, her career, how people viewed her. She was chasing proving herself time and time again. Whereas Celia was truly chasing the craft of acting. She genuinely loved it, and she was seeking a more like, I don't know how I want to say this, like almost like a more down to earth kind of life. And I don't know
Like
how else to say it,
almost
but
like traditional, right? They
kind
were
of,
like,
yeah.
just were like, she worked, she
Yeah.
had like, her wife, like her partner, and like
Yes.
just they had that life, right? That they could
Yes.
build together. And I think that was like Celia's goal. And like
Yep.
Evelyn just she felt very like chip on her shoulder and just always had to keep moving. So now, husband number 4.
Yes.
Clever Rex North. So Rex and her were co-stars.
Mm-hmm.
And they like go into this marriage like with an agreement that like
It's
just
like
gonna be a marriage.
It's literally like a sexless, platonic, like the only interest is having like their name be tied together. And that way it becomes lucrative for them. They get movie deals out of it.
Mhm.
It really is a career furthering thing. And then they both just kind of, do their own things, but together they are married.
Yep. And then so their movie, they star in Anna Karenina together.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie like goes wild.
Yep.
And so like during this time too, Evelyn and Celia don't talk for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Like there's a 5-year gap where they just don't have any contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so during this time too, Celia is actually engaged to a quarterback, John.
Hmm?
And we find that out in like the little news clippings.
Yep. That marriage is kind of another hoax, because John is actually seeing Harry. So one of those fun situations. Now, with Rex, though, he actually, unfortunately, gets another woman pregnant, and Evelyn has this plan for how they're going to get out of the marriage. She's like, here's what we'll do. We're going to have the movie. It's going to blow up. We'll say that we had tension on set, or so we fell in love here, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that's all fine and dandy. However, there's a woman over here who's carrying my child, so we got to speed that shit up. So basically, they make a plan to have Evelyn, quote unquote, cheat on Rex with Harry. So Harry, her best friend, I love Harry so much. I really do.
I know.
And like, Harry jokingly is like, basically he's like, I might be gay, but I have thought about betting you a time or two, like, can't even lie. And they get caught purposefully with the paparazzi. So divorce with Rex takes place, and we are very quickly moving on to marriage number 5.
Yep.
And I love the entry to this one. It is brilliant, kind-hearted, tortured Harry Cameron.
I know. I love Harry.
I do too.
Even, I mean, he does something bad, but
yeah,
I still love Harry. And so, like Britt said, Celia and John's marriage is a faux marriage. So why not have another faux marriage and just have, Harry and Evelyn get married, and then basically John and Harry are together and Celia and Evelyn are together.
Honestly,
sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, I mean, for the time, probably genius.
They have just like, I feel like they're in like a little bubble for a while, the 4 of them. Like Celia and Evelyn reconnect, Harry and John are in love, and it's just like this little happy family for a while, right?
Yeah. And like, something that I thought was so interesting, and I feel like at this point I fully understood why they did it. Harry is talking to Evelyn and is basically like, I think that we should have a family together. And she's like, first of all, you know what that entails, right? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. We'll get over that part. But they end up having a daughter together because he and Evelyn had such a strong, like, true love for each other, not in the romantic sense, but truly in like, I feel like they were unintentional soulmates, like in a very like kind of platonic way. And so they decide to have a child together. So they have their daughter Connor, and they co-parent for the rest of their lives together in a way that I think was probably one of the most beautiful parts of her whole story, was how much Harry loved Connor, and just how that all came together, and how Connor really did look like Harry and just carried on like that piece of him. And yeah, it was just, I thought it was really sweet. Now, again, Celia was not not great with this idea. And this was the part where, like, earlier I could fully understand, and something coming up I also kind of understand. But this with Harry, like, I know it feels super uncomfortable, but I think given their, like, very strange predicament in, like, their familial circle with this dual faux marriages and being beards for each other, you know, Celia had a pretty strong reaction to the idea of her wanting a child with Harry. And yeah, I just thought it was interesting, like, the pitfalls and the ups and downs they kind of had to go through. But Evelyn is headstrong, and there's not a whole lot that can change her mind.
Yeah, and I think Celia was like okay with it at first, and then it just kind of like that jealousy piece, right? Which I totally get it. Like, I totally get it. So there's a cute little moment, like Celia's off like filming a movie, and so like Harry and Evelyn kind of like form this little routine, like, just this little family routine with her, Harry, and Connor, and he makes her breakfast in the morning and all this stuff, and then Celia comes home and is like, nope, I'm making breakfast, and makes this like bland oatmeal. But it was like Celia like staking her claim and on Evelyn, like, so it was like, I don't care if you guys are co-parenting, like, this is where the relationship is. And Celia actually encourages Evelyn to do a movie.
Yep.
And Evelyn is like, I think Celia wants me to be who she expects me to be. And like Evelyn's kind of evolving here, but she's like, all right, I'll do it if you want me to do the movie. It just so happens that she's playing opposite Donna Adler.
Yep. And something else that happens in this movie is that they are pushing the boundaries in film a little bit more, and they want Evelyn to do a sex scene opposite of Dawn. And during this time frame, there was no, like, in Hollywood now, they have like intimacy coordinators and like a whole bunch of stuff. But like during that time frame, they sure did not have that.
No.
And Evelyn kind of knows that this is not something that she should be doing without talking to Celia first. However, she does do it without talking to Celia first. She kind of adopts the idea of ask for forgiveness instead of permission. So then when she goes to tell her to kind of ask for permission, but it is for forgiveness because it already happened, Celia tells her that she can't handle it. She can't stomach it to see her on screen with Dodd like that. Like, she just could not do it. And then Evelyn has to tell her, like, ooh, it already happened. And that's where we see the second breakup for Celia and Evelyn. And this one really just broke them.
Yeah. Like, Evelyn present day is like, I slept with Mick to, say I wanted to protect our careers. I slept with Harry for Connor. Like, she, like, to her, like, everything has been justified that she's done, right?
Yep.
But to Celia, like, back in the day, like, it just fresh and just, I couldn't stand it. Like, I understand.
Yeah.
Evelyn says, I'm not a good person, Monique. Like, make sure in the book, like, that's clear. Like, I'm not a good person.
Yeah.
I did a lot of things that hurt people, and I would probably do them over again if I had to. She looks at her life like that's where she needed to go. And Monique's like, oh no, you don't seem like a bad person, Evelyn.
Yeah.
And Evelyn's like, you of all people are going to change your mind about that very soon.
And that was something that I was trying to grapple, like, what could it possibly be that Monique would feel so deeply impacted by what Evelyn did? And I truly did not fit all of the pieces together, but I felt like there had to be something about Evelyn's past that tied into Monique. I had no idea what it was. We move forward, and unfortunately, John did die of a heart attack. So Harry's love of his life, it, was one of those things where life didn't make sense. He was the most athletic, the most fit out of all of them. And Harry just completely falls apart. He starts drinking. Evelyn is like, I think it's time for us to get a divorce. Celia is seen with a Hollywood newcomer, Joan Marker, and they start being, Hollywood besties now that her and Evelyn are no longer. Eventually, like I said, they divorce, and Evelyn gets swept off of her feet, actually, by Max.
Because Harry and her were married for 15 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they had a good time, good time there, but like Harry kind of goes into a spiral after John dies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and husband number 6, Mr.
Husband
Max.
number 6. I can't believe we're on husband number 6.
I know, we're almost there.
Yeah.
So Max was her, I think, director or producer when she did the film in Paris.
Yes.
So coming back, and he wants her to do another film. Just, sweeps Evelyn off her feet. And I think with Evelyn too, you know, the whole Celia thing, like, kind of fizzling out, Harry, you know, kind of going in a spiral. She was just like kind of looking for that, like, savior moment, you know, and Max just happened to be there.
Totally. And Max like sparked something in her again. Like, she really felt like Max truly desired her and wanted her and loved her. And she felt like sexually attracted to him, and she kind of, you know, fell into him. It was very quick again. They were in Joshua Tree to get married, and somewhere in the midst of everything, like, Max's whole demeanor shifted pretty quickly. And that's something I thought was super interesting, was like, a lot of these men had this like very honed in narrow perception of who Evelyn was. And when she didn't live up to those expectations, like, immediately, they were all like, oh, wow, this is not what I expected. How could you do this to me? And so she quickly realized, though, that he only liked the idea of being with Evelyn. He liked the idea of having a movie star on his arm. He liked the idea of who she was, like who her persona was to the public. And it wasn't that he was truly in love with her. He was in love with that concept and the idea of her. He idolized her in a way, I would say.
Yep. Yeah, like, she was like a trophy to him, just showing him around.
Exactly.
So she was in New York with Connor and Harry, and Max went to the Academy Awards alone. So they watched the Academy Awards together at home. And Celia was up for a nomination. And she ends up winning. And just as she's about to leave, like, end her speech, Celia says, "And to anyone tempted to kiss the TV tonight, please don't chip your tooth." And, like, I couldn't imagine, like, I'm getting emotional.
I know.
But, like, I couldn't imagine being like Evelyn, right? And, like,
no,
you know, you just went through this. You haven't talked to Celia in how long? Like 10 years or something
decade.
like that?
It was a decade, yeah.
And Connor's like, "Mom, why are you crying?"
This part got to me.
Yeah, and Harry's like, "Just call her. Like, it's never a bad idea to bury hatchets." So they start writing letters to each other. And, like, the first letter too, so way back when they would, like, leave notes to each other, they had, like, code names, so Evelyn would always sign it as Edward.
Yes.
And so I think it's kind of important too, like, when Evelyn does write this first letter to Celia, she, like, signs it like, "All my love, Edward," and then crosses it out and puts Evelyn. So just kind of, like, I feel like it's a good moment for Evelyn to, like, want to take that step, right?
I agree.
They start sending letters back and forth to each other, and
and she goes to LA to go see her, but on her way out, Max discovers these letters because she had them hidden in a box up in the closet, and she debated taking them with her, but opted not to. Of course. As soon as she said that, I was like, oh, he's going to find this shit. So he finds them. He's throwing them everywhere. He's throwing a fit. And he basically threatens to out Evelyn and more or less ruin her life. She kind of just, at this point, I think she's done. I think she's like, I'm over it. I'm done. She takes no shit. And he's like, "You're not going to leave." And she's like, "The fuck I'm not. The fuck I'm not." Yes, she goes to leave. She goes to see Celia. And pretty much that was that. They just, at the end, after they reconnect, they go over a few things. They both just say, "We're home." Like, they were always meant to find each other, and they were always meant to get back to each other. And ends up getting divorced from Max amid rumors of cheating. And Max does everything to try and throw Evelyn under the bus. And when I say everything, I mean everything. But he does so much that no one believes him, because he's throwing anything at the wall to see what will stick. And it turns out that nothing sticks if you throw the whole pot. You know what I mean? That was her divorce. And her and Celia hatch this plan where they're going to move together. They're going to take Connor. They're going to go to Spain or somewhere in Europe where they can live a life quietly and away from the limelight so they can truly just be together. This plan involves Harry, and Harry has to say yes. And Harry's not on board because Harry is currently in love with another man, and they're deciding what will happen next. And Harry proposes LA, New York, really anywhere inside of the United States, but that's not what Celia and Evelyn want.
So, and like Harry says, you know, like he didn't think he would be able to love again after John.
Mm-hmm.
So Evelyn takes a cab to Harry's house.
Yes, because they're going to hop on a flight.
Not Harry Styles.
Not Harry Styles.
Not Harry Styles' house.
Because they're going to hop on a flight, and then they're going to talk about their future and figure out what's going on. So she's going to pick him up.
Like she's just talking to her driver on the way,
and something to, so the driver's, you know, an actor, an up and coming actor trying to make it big. He asks like, oh, you know, if you have some time to spare, I would love to kind of pick your brain basically about being an actor. In her head, and the way she's talking out loud to Monique in this kind of interview style, she was like, I was going to tell him that it was mostly luck and that you have to be willing to deny your heritage, to commodify your body, to lie to good people, to sacrifice who you love in the name of what people will think, and to choose the false version of yourself time and time again until you forget who you started out as or why you started doing it to begin with. And I think this is Evelyn really starting to come to terms with the fact that she's lost so much of her life and the things that truly matter for the sake of chasing this fame. And something that I don't think we really have touched on much, but it's Evelyn's heritage too. Like, they really molded her into this like Americanized, like quote unquote white blonde girl when she very much was not a white girl. Like, she stopped speaking Spanish, she stopped doing these things. She really changed her whole life for this. So this conversation that she's going to have with Harry on the plane for their future is Evelyn, I think, taking the first step in acknowledging, like, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm not willing to make them again.
Like, I don't regret what I did.
Correct.
But I now need to change my course going forward.
Yes. Yep.
Definitely. They pull around to Harry's narrow little road. She says that, like, every thought before that moment was erased from her mind.
Yep.
And she was shocked, and in front of them was a car bent around a fallen tree. And she describes like the sedan looked as if it ran head on into the trunk, knocking the tree down on top of it. And the driver's like, Miss Hugo?
Yep.
And Evelyn's like, yep, I see it. So they both get out of the car, go to try to assess what is going on with this car. And Evelyn like sees what she like feared it was, but hoping it wasn't true. And like Harry was like slumped over the steering wheel, and then there was a younger man in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, she didn't give herself time to panic. She just acts without thinking and just doing what she can with all the information that she was given.
Yeah. I think that was an interesting parallel too, to like, I noticed that through this last chunk of the book, she consistently says panic is a luxury you cannot afford, or panic was a luxury I could afford in that moment. And I thought that was a super interesting way to think about things. I think, too, because we very rarely have seen Evelyn emotional throughout her life story. It was just an interesting parallel to her saying, you act without thinking, doing all that you can with the information that you have, which is what she said about her life up front. I did the best that I could with all of the information that I had.
Definitely. She, like, takes Harry out of the car, but then she's, like, worried, like, do I move him? Is he paralyzed? And he's not doing well. Like, bloody, gashed everywhere. And then Nick, the chauffeur, does like mention that like the other gentleman that was in the car is dead. Like Evelyn has this realization, like if Harry could live, right? Like so what could she do? Like this wasn't his car, like Harry was driving, like she had to get him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't let my daughter find out her father was driving drunk and killed someone, right? Like and killed his like lover, right? And so she enlists the chauffeur, Nick, to like help really move Harry and like switch the driver, like the guy in the passenger seat to the driver's seat. So it looks like he was the one driving.
Yep.
And like, you know, they took Harry to the hospital and you know, they try and like set it up, like set the scene. And Evelyn, once they get there, like tells Nick, the chauffeur, like, you're going to go home and you're going to forget that anything ever happened. You're going to call me. I'll get a room at Beverly Hills Hotel for you. First thing in the morning, you're not going to talk to anyone else between now and then. Do you hear me? Not your mother, not your friends. You tell them you found a man on the street and you brought him to the hospital. And that's what you tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just kind of lucked out too that he wanted to be an actor. And like,
Yeah.
Evelyn Hugo just is there. Like, of course, like, you're a struggling actor. And then this, like, you know, big movie star is like, don't say a word. Like, you're going to be like, yes, ma'am. Yep. Okay.
Like, no problem. And we see their daughter, Connor, kind of devolve after this. So she's 14 at the time. And
Harry does die.
Oh, yeah. Harry does die. I thought
Harry dies
I got ahead.
about an hour later. Yeah. Like, lost too much blood. Like, he just could not be saved. And
yes.
And this is where she says, like, I had the devastating luxury of panic.
Yeah.
Like, after he was gone, she allowed herself to.
Exactly. So she got Nick his roles. He ended up going on for, to have a big successful career. And she doesn't state claim on that. She just is like, he probably would have made it on his own. But, I just kind of helped get him there. But
yeah,
they said that Harry died of an aneurysm. So there was no mention of the car accident. But she did tell Connor that he did die in a car accident. And Connor is 14. And she's skipping school. She's going to clubs. She's drinking. She's doing drugs. She was caught having a threesome. And I was like, this child is 14.
Right.
So Evelyn doesn't know what to do with her. Evelyn truly doesn't know what to do. So they kind of resort back to their original plan. They're going to move to Spain. And in moving to Spain, Celia says that Evelyn's going to marry her brother, Robert Jameson. And she's like, basically, it's like, why are we doing this again? And it's because we find out that Celia has been diagnosed with a respiratory illness with emphysema, and she's given about a decade, about 10 years roughly, to live. And she wants to ensure that her estate can also be left to Evelyn, along with her brother. Basically, Evelyn lays some ground rules down with Connor, and they're going to like this very small, quaint, like fishing town in the coast of Spain. And there's not a whole lot going on. They're going to have Evelyn, Celia, and Robert. And the rules are that Connor must have dinner with Evelyn every single night. And she must see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. One of the two. I think it was a psychologist. And yeah, psychologist. And Connor kind of reluctantly agrees. But once they get to the coastal town, a few months in, it really starts to settle. Like, it was the best thing that they could have done for her and for themselves. They really get to live, like, I want to call it like a life of quiet luxury, where they have pretty much everything that they need, kind of sheltered away from the world. They're able to just enjoy themselves. Robert unintentionally becomes this, like, father figure to Connor in a really cute way. Like, they play board games together, and he teaches her all about finance, and Connor ends up getting A's and B's, gets into Stanford, goes for finance, ends up on Wall Street because of Robert. And, even though she ends up following a different kind of line of passion, it just, having that stable figure in her life again really changed the trajectory of her life. And it turns out that this marriage, this seventh husband that Evelyn had, was probably one of the best decisions that she had made, because she got to fulfill her dreams of being with Celia truly and honestly. And she told Connor too, like, I love how forthcoming she was with her about everything that happened. And I think that was really important to rebuilding the relationship, because Connor was always closer with Harry than she was with Evelyn.
Yep. Celia does end up passing away. She has a respiratory illness. And Robert passes away, and Connor passes away to breast cancer.
Yeah.
And so
this was devastating.
Yeah. Now in like the present day, Evelyn's like, everyone I love is dead. Like,
yeah.
She is like at that point now. She's the last person standing.
Yeah.
And so, everyone's like, that's how my story ends, with the loss of everyone I have ever loved. And with me in a big, beautiful Upper East Side apartment, missing everyone who ever meant anything to me. She tells Monique to make it clear that I don't love this apartment, that I don't care about all my money, that I could give a rat's ass if people think I'm a legend. That the adoration of millions of people has never warmed my bed. When you write the ending, Monique, tell everyone that it is the people I miss. Tell everyone that I got it wrong. That I chose the wrong things most of the time. Make sure the reader understands that all I was ever really looking for was family. Make sure it's clear that I found it. Make sure they know that I'm heartbroken without it. You know, she goes on to say, like, remind them that Evelyn Hugo never existed. She's a person I made up for them so that they would love me. And that she was confused for a very long time about what love was, and tell them I understand it now and I don't need their love anymore.
Yeah.
And that Evelyn Hugo just wants to go home. It's time for her to go to her daughter, her lover, and her best friend and her mother. Tell them Evelyn Hugo says goodbye. And Monique's like, what do you mean goodbye?
Like, what are we talking about here? And she ignores it. Basically is like, I would do everything. As she goes, Monique, as you're writing this narrative, just know I would do everything all over again to protect my family. And I thought I could have saved them. And there's one thing. She walks over to her desk, pulls out a piece of paper, and she says, the man in the car with Harry, the one I left, it is like, this is the most egregious thing she's done, but I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done the same for someone that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
But Evelyn says, Harry had fallen in love with the black man. His name was James Grant, and he died February 26th, 1989.
As we know, James Grant is actually Monique's father.
Mm-hmm.
Monique Grant. And so Monique is like feeling all sorts of emotions, like, you know, fury, fear, denial, like this must be a mistake, you know, nope, it's the truth. And, you know, are you sad or angry? And just like, can I assign blame? And she like goes back to like, you know, the story that she knows about her father's death and is like, this was out of the norm, right? Like it was out of character that her dad was driving drunk and lost control. Like that wasn't normal, but that's what the story was, right? So now it's kind of like all falling into place and just like going through her body. Like I can't imagine though, like being Monique and being like finding that out. Like you're so invested in Evelyn, right? And the way like Evelyn told the story, like you understand where Evelyn's coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then to find out like she basically framed your dad for this, you know, and it's just,
I just can't even imagine. And she also realizes too, like her dad was in love with a man.
Mm-hmm.
And she just wonders what the impact of that is. And it's just, it's so much for her to take in. So much. But there is a letter. That's the note that she had. And it was to Harry from James. And it was just telling him, like, I love you. I love you in a way I never thought that was possible. But I can't leave my family. Like, I can't crack my family like that. I think you should move to Europe. I think that's what's best for you. You know, my family has my heart, but like, I don't think that I'll find love like I have with you. And basically just says, just know that here, you're mine. I'm here with my family, but I'm always thinking of you, and you were my love. Yeah, this was devastating.
I know, and I feel like it's such like a contrast to Evelyn, right? Because Evelyn, like, you know, James chose to stay with his family, right? Mm-hmm. And then it spiraled with like Harry, you know?
Yep.
And where Evelyn, you know, tried to protect her family at all costs, but didn't really stay, like, she wasn't ready to give up her love. Like, she always like had Celia, you know, where like James was ready to give up a love to be with his family. Like, I don't know, just the protecting of families was like a contrast to me. Yeah. I thought it was interesting.
Did you think that Harry intentionally did this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, because Evelyn had the note that had to have been on his person. And I think that Harry...
I feel like Harry... I don't think he intentionally
killed them.
But I think he was drunk enough and was very, like,
out of
reckless.
His mind. Yes.
Yeah. And they were probably arguing in the car and on the way home. And, you know, it just, like, this is why you don't drive drunk, people. You just don't.
No.
Especially, well, like, Now there's so many safer ways to get home.
Yep. And even under like high emotional duress, like positive
Mm-hmm.
or negative, can really impact things.
Yep.
But yeah, I was reading this, and as I was sitting there, I was like, I feel like that had to have been even subconsciously intentional on Harry's side.
Yeah,
Like,
I
because
can
I
just
don't think,
like being reckless and just like,
yeah, I don't think he would have ever chosen to leave Evelyn and Connor like that.
mm-mm.
I think that it was definitely not just an accident.
Yeah. Monique like takes a while to like process everything, which I don't blame her. Like that's a
Yeah.
lot of information. Like one, you just like learned all this stuff about Evelyn.
Mhm.
You just learned this about your father, right? All this stuff, and Monique's like, like, how did you find me? Like, like this is why I'm here. Like you think this story is gonna make up for everything,
Yeah.
you know? And Monique's like, so you put me through all of this just to like, relieve your guilt and make sure you got the book about your life that you wanted? And Evelyn's like, just, stop. Don't act like you're not going to be benefiting from this too. Like, you've been a willing participant. You wanted the story. You took advantage, definitely and smartly. Like, Monique is just kind of like, just cut the crap. Like, I feel like Monique is just like, she doesn't know how to process this.
Especially because Evelyn, like, really strung her along in this
Mhm.
process. And she knew she had to, because if she revealed this information at the beginning, there's no way Monique would have sat through all of it. But
No.
also, Evelyn is very calculated and knows exactly what she's doing all the time. And I think
Mhm.
she knew with some level of certainty that there was going to be a nasty fallout from this. And she just kept telling Monique along the way, like, Monique's like, you seem like a fine person. I'm just confused as to why you keep saying that you're a bad person. I think Monique even says, like, my hate is not uncomplicated, because you can have these strong, intense feelings of hatred, of fury, of anger, but still also be understanding toward the why and the how.
Yep. And so Monique is like, I'm leaving. Bye. Like,
Yeah.
we're done. Evelyn's like, I was just going to say, I understand and I'll see you tomorrow. And Monique's like, tomorrow? I'm not coming back here. And
she's
Evelyn's like, well, what about the cover?
The photo
Like,
shoot? Hello?
Yeah.
So they do the photo shoot. Evelyn reveals that she also has breast cancer and she's dying, and she needed to do this sooner rather than later. And Monique kind of puts the pieces together that Evelyn has no intention of living beyond the day now that her story was done.
Yep.
And as she's leaving, she kind of is like, should I call the police? Should I call 911? Like, I know what's happening. And she feels like it would be a betrayal to Evelyn after all that was said and done to stop her from the inevitable. And Evelyn ends up dying by suicide. They said that basically she unintentionally overdosed, even though we know it was very much intentional.
Yep.
And what I thought was interesting, though, and I don't think we talked about why, but Monique had written a piece about basically like assisted suicide, more or less.
Yeah.
And dying with dignity. And that is a piece that Evelyn found by Monique that actually really connected her to it, where Evelyn wanted to be able to die on her own terms, in her own way, in her own house, now that her story was told and she had nothing else to live for. And that was an interesting tie-in kind of to the end. The book kind of ends with a clip from Vivant saying, it's in the New York Tribune, actually. There's two articles. Me looking, I'm like, I thought there was one at Vivant. What am I talking about? But there's one in the New York Tribune about Evelyn's death. Then we end the book with an article from Vivant that just says Evelyn and Me, written by Monique, and it's this kind of snippet of her life. And she talks about how Evelyn was just a super complex person. She went over the transcripts hundreds of times, and she says, and I know what Evelyn would want to reveal in these pages, along with the stunning photos taken just hours before her death, is one very surprising but beautifully true thing. And that is this. Evelyn Hugo was bisexual and spent the majority of her life madly in love with fellow actress Celia St. James. And she just goes through and says she wanted to help the community to be visible because she couldn't be I'm going to show you the real Evelyn. I'm going to show you an excerpt from the upcoming biography that I've written. She asked, doesn't it bother you to have so many husbands and all of this to your name? And she said, no, because they are just husbands. I am Evelyn Hugo. And anyway, I think once people know the truth, they will be much more interested in my wife. Because her and Celia never formally married, but they had a marriage ceremony before, Celia passed away, where they exchanged vows, and Evelyn basically was like, I've had a few of these done. I know what to do. And it was just a very sweet moment where, they're like, well, we can't get married. And Evelyn's like, who the fuck says we can't get married? We're getting married. And she lived out the rest of her days with Celia as her wife to them spiritually. And yeah, it was just, I think, a very beautiful story of loss and grief and hiding your true self. And it was just such a beautiful book.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to read it.
Me too.
Because it is a book that I've always, and I'm glad it was fun rereading it too.
Yeah.
Like, I think I texted you, like, I was like 10% and I was like, I remember everything that happened in this book, which is rare because sometimes we talk about how we forget everything that happens.
Yeah.
But I remember basically everything that happens in this book. So
I think it's interesting too, because sometimes you guys, we'll read a book and then record it like 2 days later and we're like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah, I think even if I didn't reread this book, I could have had the same
conversation about
but it was fun to reread and like revisit these characters.
Yes. I'm so glad you suggested this one. I was very happy to read that. So
I know, because I was like, I've already read it, but I feel like it's just still such a good read, and you hadn't read it, so
yeah.
All right, let's talk about our songs, because I'm interested to see Ivy, because that wasn't even, I mean, one, I already chose it, but that wasn't even on my like short list.
Yeah, so this was the first song that I thought of. And the reason that I thought of this is there's a ton of interpretations of this song. I've read them every which way to Tuesday. I've tried to figure out like what the real interpretation of the song is, and I think it's really left up to your own devices. However, there is a theory that this song is actually about a lesbian relationship, or a relationship between two women that's sort of an affair with a man as an overarching theme. And so the song starts out by saying, how's one to know? I'd meet you where the spirit meets the bones in a faith-forgotten land. In from the snow, your touch brought forth an incandescent glow, tarnished but so grand. And I almost feel like this song is Celia's perspective through it. I think there's a bit of Evelyn kind of trickling through in the parallels of their life, but I'd meet you where the spirit meets the bones in a faith-forgotten land. And I think you could take that literally. I think you could talk about how the spirit meets the bones and things like that. But I also think that we could talk about I'd meet you where the spirit meets the bones in a faith-forgotten land. So the faith-forgotten land to me would be Hollywood. And where the spirit meets the bones is realizing that the undercurrent of love, where their souls intertwined, like who would have thought that the two of them would have met in that way? Like their spirit meets the bone in their love for each other. And your touch brought forth an incandescent glow, tarnished but so grand. Like she never would have expected to have that happen. And it says, and the old widow goes to the stone every day, but I don't. I just sit here and wait, grieving for the living. And I think this is Celia just in the years that they didn't have together. Like I'm sitting here grieving for the living, grieving for the life that we had. And the old widow goes to the stone every day, I think is almost like watching Evelyn like go through these cycles of her husbands and her relationships and them not being able to be together. So I think this, to me, Ivy, I interpret it more as like a metaphorical song for this book rather than more of like a literal take on it. But the chorus is, oh goddamn, my pain fits in the palm of your freezing hand, taking mine, but it's been promised to another. And I think that really is just Celia and Evelyn, where your pain is in my hand. I am your person. Our spirits meet the bone. We are like one. We are meant to be together. But your hand's been promised in another. And I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamlands. My house of stone, your ivy grows. And now I'm covered in you. And no matter what they do, the years, the 5 years off, the 10 years off, the being friends, the being lovers, the cyclical kind of nature of their relationship is you put up a house of stone in your heart. You're trying to block it off, but no matter what, her ivy just keeps growing and she's covered in her no matter what. And this is interesting. The next verse is, I wish to know the fatal flaw that makes you long to be magnificently cursed. And I think that really is, I think this is just Celia's song. Like, I want to know the fatal flaw that makes Evelyn Hugo so cursed in life with her husbands, with everything that happens. And it says, he's in the room, your opal eyes are all I wish to see, and he wants what's only yours. Like, your husband's in the room. I want, like, your eyes are all that I want to see, but he's with you and I can't have you. And again, the chorus repeats itself. And then this one, clover blooms in the fields, spring breaks loose, the time is near. What would he do if he found us out? And I think he could be not just one person, but I think he could be society, Hollywood as a whole. Crescent moon, coast is clear, spring breaks loose, but so does fear. He's going to burn this house to the ground. And again, I think it's that he represents so much more than just one person. He's going to burn this house to the ground. That could have been anyone if they were found out together. That could have been, and their house was their career, their relationship, their livelihood. Everything is represented in their house. And this is what really sold me on it, though. It's, how's one to know I'd live and die for moments that we stole on begged and borrowed time. So tell me to run, or dare to sit and watch what will become and drink my husband's wine. And the begged and borrowed time, moments that we stole, like, that just is their relationship to me. They had so many fleeting moments, and so many moments where I think even in the book too, Celia says, we've wasted so much time. We could have had all this time together. And Evelyn's like, it was all begged and borrowed time as is, you know? And that one line, the tell me to run or dare to sit and watch what will become and drink my husband's wine, that is Evelyn in a nutshell to me. Like, she always said that she went back for Celia. She tried to talk to her. And when Celia blocked her out, she said, you know what? She wants nothing to do with me. And she never tried again. And so she's like Evelyn's telling Celia, like, tell me to run, tell me to get away, or you're going to sit there and watch me be with my husband, be with someone that's not you. And it goes back into the chorus. And what's interesting here is it ends with so yeah, it's a fire. It's a goddamn blaze in the dark and you started it. And so yeah, it's a war. It's the goddamn fight of my life and you started it. And I just think it's like just about their tumultuous love for each other and how no matter what, they kept coming back to each other. And it ends with I can't stop you putting roots in my dreamland. My house is stone, your ivy grows, and now I'm covered in you. And now I'm covered in you. And yeah, I just feel like it is the perfect. There were so many songs that I feel like could have been about Evelyn, but this one really spoke to me from Celia, because I think Celia's story was almost the most heartbreaking through this whole journey.
Yes.
And this song, to me, I could just picture Celia like this cutting over pieces of her in a movie. And I think something that I love too, and I didn't realize we did it as much as we do, is we kind of like think of books in terms of what they would be like as a film and like how they would be interpreted. And I feel like Ivy would fit in this movie without a doubt. So
that's how I feel about my song too.
Yeah, that's why I chose Ivy. Very different interpretation. And I love that about music and about books, though, is that you can see things so differently. Because you chose the song for September House, which is nothing like Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And
I know,
he's going to burn this house to the ground was actually literal in the September House. So,
right?
Yeah, I had to stick with this one.
Yeah, no, I think I picked it before. I think it's a great song. So, so I picked Maroon by Taylor Swift, and I feel like it just has like a very like sensual vibe to it too. Like that. I feel like it's a Celia and Evelyn song, you know?
Yes.
That's the underlying theme. But even so, the first verse is literally, when the morning came, we were cleaning incense off your vinyl shelf because we lost track of time again. Laughing with my feet in your lap like you were my closest friend. How'd we end up on the floor anyway? Your roommate's cheap-ass screw-top rosé, that's how. I see you every day now. And that just, to me, was like the start of their relationship, right? Like, you know, they just started hanging out, lost track of time, and, you know, Evelyn saw her as like her closest friend before she really like realized what that like love was, right? And, you know, then she sees her every day. Like, it's just, you know, they don't like how it happened, right? the next line is, I chose you. That's when Evelyn's like, yep, all right, I'm choosing Celia, like, let's do this, right? And so one moment I don't think we talked about in the book too is like Celia does spill wine on her shirt, and Evelyn gives her one of her shirts.
Yep.
So this next like the chorus is, the burgundy on my t-shirt when you splash the wine into me, and how the blood rushed to my cheeks so scarlet it was maroon. And so it's just like that moment, and like, so in that moment is when Evelyn kind of like, really, I feel like that's when it clicks for Evelyn that she loves Celia, right? Like she wants to give her the world. She doesn't want to just give her the shirt. She wants to give her the world, right?
Yep.
And it's, the next line is like, the mark you saw on my collarbone, the rust that grew between telephones, the lips I used to call home, so scarlet it was maroon. Like that was just like right there with them, right? Like, they had this intimate moment, then they grew apart, right? The rust between telephones, like they didn't talk for a while. The lips that she used to call home, because they called each other home, right? Like she just wanted to go home to her family at all times. And so, the next is, when the silence came, we were shaken, blind and hazy. How the hell did we lose sight of us again? And ain't that the way shit always ends? It's just very much like that strain in their relationship, right? Like, carnations you had thought were roses, that's us. I feel you no matter what, the rubies that I gave up. It's just like, Evelyn thinks like that she's doing it for Celia, and Celia's like, I gave up this for you, and just that like clash there, right?
Yeah.
Then the next line is, and I lost you. So it's just like that parallel there. And then later in the song, it's like, and I wake with your memory. That's a real fucking legacy. So just like, they both wake up with this memory, and like the memory of like the chipped tooth, right? Like that's one thing that stands out to me is like, just those memories are just like such a legacy to leave in their life. And, it's just such a big part, right? And so I just like that song just felt very them throughout their relationship, and just like the vibe of the song too, I feel like is just such like it's not a romantic song, but you can feel like the tension and like the passion that like she's singing about. So cool. I mean both of our songs I feel like are great Taylor songs.
Top tier.
Let's talk about our ratings.
Yes.
So for those that are new here, we rate into the moon and to Saturn, because the star ratings are for the real reviews, right? These are our reviews.
Yes.
On our vibes. So Britt does moons and I do Saturns. So let's see what we landed with.
Let's see.
Seven Husbands.
Okay. So I think this one was hard for me because I had such like an expectation going into it. And I thought this one was without a doubt going to be a 5-star read for me. It was very close. I'm rating this 4.5 moons. I thought it was beautiful. I thought Evelyn's story was brilliant. I thought the tie-ins to the LGBTQ plus community were amazing. I really thought it was harrowing, heartbreaking, devastating, and beautiful simultaneously. What kind of knocked it for me was I felt like Monique was so bland, and I didn't care about her. And I wanted to care about her. I was devastated for her when the information about her father was revealed. That I was. But I was devastated for her because of the story that Evelyn set up, not because of Monique. And I just feel like if we had a slightly more, I don't know, charismatic or interesting, like, primary narrator in terms of like the contrast between her and Evelyn, I think it could have been a 5-star for me. It was very, very close. But this is also not my typical genre. It's considered like it's a historical kind of romance, a historical kind of fiction, and I loved it. Please read this book. I thought it was amazing. I think that my expectations were like just a smidge too high going in, but 4.5 moons is where I landed.
That's fair. So this season, the second time, giving it 5 Saturns.
Love.
I mean, I agree with you with Monique, but I think when I read it 2 years ago, to remember as much as I did,
yes,
and reading it again, like rereading it and still having that same excitement that I had.
Totally.
Definitely a 5 Saturn read for me.
I love that.
I'm a huge fan of Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Yeah.
Love Daisy Jones is another top book for me. Malibu Rising's great. I have all her other ones on my bookshelf that are on my TBR. But no, rereading it too, like I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about Monique as much. But I think I'm just like still so invested in Evelyn, like
totally,
you know, and I love that. So definitely,
yeah.
I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea, right? If you're like want a romance, like it's completely different. Like it's not.
Yeah, and I knew it wasn't like a romance, and
I feel like some people pick it up like thinking that, but it's very.
It's not. It's romantic.
Contemporary fiction. Yeah.
It's romantic. It's not a romance. And I loved Evelyn's story. And I think this is one that I might sit on and I might end up like feeling like it impacted me more than I realized at first. But I still absolutely adored it. And I think this is the first time ever that you've written a book higher than I have.
I think it is. This is
a historic moment.
Yeah. Everybody, what's the date? It's July 3rd. So this is like a Independence Day. I'm declaring my independence as being rating higher than Brittany. We only have 2 more books. I don't know. I don't know about these last 2 if I'll rate them higher than you, but at least we have 1 this season.
You know, yes, we have 2 5s from Hannah, and up until this point, I think we have two 5s from me.
I can't not rate this a 5 Saturn. Just the way that like I've recommended it to people, the way I talk about it, the way it's impacted me, it's definitely a 5 Saturn for me.
Yeah. So our next book, we're doing something a little different, a little fun. So we have been wanting to tackle Kristen Hanna. However, historical fiction is not our genre. Like not like this, but like historical fiction in general, like the type that Kristen Hanna writes is just everything that we've read of it has not been our vibe. But we still wanted to give her a shot. So we are bringing you for the second to last book of season 2 of the Music for a Book podcast, Christmas in July. And we are going to be reading Comfort and Joy by Kristen Hanna.
So our last Christmas episode, even though Brittany is very like anti-Christmas theme and music, but was like a murder, right? The incestuous murder. So if you haven't listened to that and that intrigues you, go back and listen to some incestuous murder house vibes.
I'm not gonna lie, that episode was so much fun.
Yeah, but this one is like more of a lighthearted read too, because like Kristen Hanna, like historical fiction. I think she began as a romance author too.
Probably.
And, like, wrote some like women's fiction. So excited to read this little Christmas book. I've had it for years, and we were like talking about reading a Kristen Hanna. I was like, let's do this one. Like this one doesn't seem as intimidating, and I did start it, and I'm excited.
I can't wait
because there's some drama in the first chapter.
We love drama. Hot goss. It's fine.
Yes.
All right. So thank you all so much for listening. This book was a joy to do, and it was something very different. I feel like we've tackled a lot of, a variety of things on the podcast so far. So it was really cool to dive into a book that is beloved by so many. So if you could please rate and review the podcast, it helps us so much with exposure on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yes. And follow us on social media. We have a Patreon too, which we are nearing the end of season 2, which is crazy.
Insane.
But we have some fun things planned for like the end of summer, early fall, before season 3 starts.
Yes.
And some will be available on Spotify, but some are going to be Patreon exclusive.
Correct.
So definitely we would love to see you over there to kind of, I don't know, we'll hint at maybe like some throwback stuff. You never know.
Maybe we're reading some teenage favorites.
Yeah,
maybe I'm reading
just throw it back.
A hit series for the first time ever. Maybe
we'll see. But join our Patreon so you can actually see and you can hang out with us.
Yep. So thank you all so much again. We will see you for our Christmas in July episode on Comfort and Joy in just about 2 weeks.
Yep. So keep reading with kindness, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.